was shared to us by Sec. Chua. Now, it will be up to our elected leaders to set the overall direction, economic policy decisions, and exercise political will to execute with discipline the measures that need to be done. The business community wants to continue to work hand in hand with the government. Finally, I would like to thank Chairman Albert Gamboa and Brian Edang for continuing to help spearhead this initiative. Thanks to Blanca Mercado and, of course, immediate past president of Phoenix, Attorney Francis Lim, for the continued support for this program. Thank you as well to my tokayo, Attorney Mike Toledo, for moderating our event, and thank you to our panel who helped screen the questions to be raised this afternoon. I'm sure there will be other questions directly from the attendees, but again, I would like to thank Governor Saiti Tanco, our current MC, Ms. Riza Matari, thank you, and Mr. Romy Bernardo. I am excited to hear from Vice President Lenny, and I look forward to an engaging session. Again, good afternoon, and mabuhay ang Phoenix.
Thank you, President Mike. May I now introduce our moderator for today's session, our second Mike. My friend, Attorney Mike Toledo, is the Director for Government and Public Affairs of the Metro Pacific Investments Corporation. He is also the head of the MPP Group Media Bureau. Attorney Toledo writes a regular column in the Philippine Star. He is a host of One News Channel's Titans and Signal TV. Mike served as press secretary and presidential spokesperson during the administration of former President Joseph Ejercito Estrada. Mike was also the campaign spokesman and media bureau director of former Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro, who ran for president in 2010. He obtained his Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of the Philippines. He earned his Master of Laws in Public International Law at the prestigious London School of Economics and Political Science through a scholarship grant from the British government. He was accepted at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University in 1993. Attorney Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, dear Risa, for that very, very kind introduction. If perhaps I can hire you on a professional basis to introduce me to the next events that I would host, although I know you're going to be very expensive. But thank you so much. And considering that I understand you're in quarantine because you just arrived from the United States, you're looking quite relaxed. Thank you again. And I would also like to thank, of course, our friends in Phoenix and the other participating business organizations and our media partners for having me as the moderator for this Meet the Presidentiables series. It is indeed a great honor to be part of this advocacy. We had initially Senator Ping Lacson about a month ago, and now, of course, we will have no less than VP Lenny Robredo. And hopefully, as we move forward closer to the elections, we will have the other presidential candidates. I've always believed, personally, that an enlightened, educated electorate citizenry can actively participate in the democratic space. And it is good that advocacies like this are being done by the business organizations. However, I would just like to add that perhaps it is also quite imperative that, considering that 75 to 80% of the voters will be coming from the Class D and E classes in our society, perhaps we should also bring this down. Bring this down to the masses so that they may understand what is at stake, what are the issues involved, and how it will affect their lives. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, again, welcome to this series. And allow me now this honor of introducing to you our featured presidential candidate for today. Maria Leonor Lenny Herona Robredo, an alternative lawyer and public servant, is the 14th Vice President of the Republic of the Philippines. Determined to bring the office of the Vice President closer to the people, VP Lenny led its transformation into an advocacy-heavy organization, inspired by her years of experience as a lawyer for the poor and the marginalized. The OVP's flagship anti-poverty program, Angat Buhay, rather, started by addressing needs in 6 advocacy areas: food security and nutrition, women empowerment, education, healthcare, rural development, and housing, and has since grown to disaster response and empowerment of key sectors. As the country grapples with the coronavirus pandemic, VP Lenny has led the OVP in the comprehensive COVID-19 response operations, which supports frontliners and communities through interventions from PPE supplies, free shuttle services, relief aid, livelihood opportunities, and testing and teleconsultation services, among others. Believing in the power of collaboration and a faith in the people, VP Lenny vows to keep working to help her fellow Filipinos, especially those in the fringes of our society. Ladies and gentlemen, let us now welcome VP Lenny Robredo for opening statement. Magandang hapon po, VP Lenny, and welcome to the forum, ma'am.
Magandang hapon, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank Finex and, of course, FFCCCII for taking the lead in organizing this opportunity for me to spend some time with you as I share my plans for our economy and the country. In 9 days, January 30 of 2022, it will be 2 years since the country confirmed its first case of COVID-19. And as I speak, more than 50,000 people have died, millions have lost their jobs, and almost every aspect of our lives has had to change. This has brought unparalleled levels of uncertainty, and we have all asked the hard questions. How do we imagine a brighter future for our nation, for those who look to us for direction, strength, and hope? How do we move our country from a state of response and survival to one of growth and prosperity? And now, against the backdrop of the presidential elections this coming May, the role of government in answering such questions has taken on greater focus and urgency. How can government create an environment that enables positive social transformation? What steps must it take to reverse the current national trajectory? And what kind of leadership can we trust to take those steps? After I filed my certificate of candidacy last October 7, I released 2 sets of plans that outline my vision in broad strokes: the Kalayaan sa COVID plan and the Hanap Buhay para sa Lahat Jobs plan. These 2 are part of the series of policy platforms that we'll be putting out every month. We are set to come up with our third this week. The first set of policies is aimed squarely at addressing the virus, the anxiety it brings in terms of our health, putting food on the table, and aspiring for better lives for our children through education. The second is a roadmap to create more opportunities through jobs and livelihood, which entails unleashing the potential of industry and reinvigorating key sectors of the economy. The glue that holds both plans together, a government that is faithful to the law and that is true to its mandate. That means, as I've said in other venues, a government that listens, one that has nothing to hide and therefore engages and actively seeks feedback, which it then crafts into a consensus that considers all views. It also means a government that is agile, that acts with urgency, because its actions are pointed towards a constant moral north. It is a government that acts ultimately in a manner that cultivates trust among the people it has sworn to serve. And with a trustworthy government, our people begin to understand that aid can be expected, that it arrives when it should, in the way that it should, and that no one faces any crisis alone. For the business community, it sends a very clear message that laws will be applied fairly, that our institutions are resistant to corruption, and that if vested interests try to game the system, government has the will and strength to correct the situation and prosecute those who try to take advantage. Results can be predicted more reliably, and that risk and volatility can be managed effectively. The energies of the entire nation can thus be focused on the project of nation building. And that means ensuring that the engines of the economy are engaged full throttle, from the centers of industry to communities in the margins. Ito yung sinasabi namin laging, gobyernong tapat, angat buhay sa lahat. In real policy terms, this means filling the ranks of government with people of character, competence, and integrity. Agencies will be led by experts in their fields, and decisions on the ground will emanate from the best available science and data. The spirit of transparency is apparent in measures like the Full Disclosure Bill, which was the very first bill I filed when I was in Congress. This makes financial transactions and documents of public interest readily accessible to the public, and is something I will prioritize should I get elected. Existing loans will be reviewed, their usage tracked, particularly loans that are made for COVID response. Spaces for dialogue, sectoral feedback, and consensus building will be created, enabling continued sustainable collaboration. A fully functioning National Competitiveness Council will be one such space. Its task will be to bridge the gap between government and the private sector, and to craft and mind a comprehensive strategy which involves all stakeholders to make the country more globally competitive. Through the entire process, the imperative will be to unlock the energies of the economy, ensuring that the Ease of Doing Business Act is implemented, for example, or that roadblocks in the form of outdated policies and laws are removed. In the same spirit, we will accelerate the digital transition and reduce the amount of human intervention that can often be an avenue for corruption. Under a more transparent, ethical, more trustworthy government, the right national priorities necessarily open the gates to progress. My commitment to the business community: we will create an environment where enterprises have a chance to compete fairly. We will not fixate on restrictions or merely wait to pounce and penalize those who step an inch out of line. Your voice will be heard as we work for the common good. As those of you who have worked with me before can attest, simply sitting at the head of the table and playing arbiter between the left hand and the right as they assert conflicting interests is not my idea of leadership. My government will listen, find points of commonality, and harmonize everyone's steps towards a single national horizon. Over the next months, the public will hear from the candidates' plans and policies on a wide range of issues. And I am sure that among those of us applying for the highest position in the land, those with a capable enough policy team will come up with proposals that are strategic, creative, or even commonsensical. Some will be said in a forceful enough manner so as to capture the imagination of the public. But the most important question cuts through all the policy clutter and goes back to trust. Whom can you trust to be true to their word, to follow through with action, to actually put into practice the plans that are pronounced on the campaign pulpit? To this, I respond only with what we all know to be true. The leader you can trust beyond the elections is the one that should have already earned your trust today through their track record and through the unshakable proof of what we have so far done with our time in public service and, in fact, our entire lives. I have worked with many of you over the past several years, not only during the time of the pandemic when we reoriented the OVP's operations to fill the gaps in government response, but through our Angat Buhay projects, where we leveraged our linkages to help the farthest reaches of the country. My track record is out there for all to see. You know how I work. You know what I believe in. You know my intentions. I have absolutely no doubt that our values and our dreams for the country align. I ask only that you consider all of this, my history, as well as those of my fellow candidates, as you reflect and decide in the coming months. Thank you very much and good day. I look forward to our conversation for the rest of the event.
Thank you. Thank you so much, VP Lenny. That was a very clear presentation of your plans moving forward. And indeed, I'm sure members of this business community are very much appreciative to hear that they will definitely play a part as far as policy making is concerned, because you will listen to them and that you have assured them that under your administration, it will be leveling the playing field. Everybody's allowed to compete and the rule of law will prevail. And that is music to the ears of many who intend to invest more in this country. So thank you so much. At this point, we begin the open forum or the session. I understand that you really have to go by 2:30 because of a previous engagement. So let me go straight to the point. We've been talking a lot about the need for foreign direct investments to come in, and that has always been heard day in and day out in all campaigns. And one of the issues being raised is that the reason why foreign direct investment are not coming into the country is the fact that our constitution provides limitations for the foreign investors to come in. Do you think that there is a need to amend certain provisions of the constitution to allow and entice more foreign investors to come in?
Mike, I do understand the long-standing concerns regarding some of the economic provisions in the Constitution. In fact, when I was still a member of the 16th Congress, there was a lot of discussions on amending the 1987 Constitution specifically for this purpose. I am very much open to exploring any proposed constitutional amendment that would unlock current roadblocks that are thrown our way, as long as we ensure that the process is open, transparent, and people are given the opportunity to participate. Kasi Mike, yun naman yung parating worry ng tao. That some of the other provisions not needing any amendments, baka pakialaman. But having said that, I believe that the most urgent among these concerns can already be addressed without going through the tedious, contentious process of amending the Constitution. And one such way is through a more responsive Public Service Act, which opens up the Philippine economy to larger scale investments and holds the potential of unlocking key industries and expanding opportunity for our people. Ang alam ko, Mike, a version is conference by Congress. Yung House version, it is a little contentious kasi sinasabi kulang ng safeguards. Yung Senate version naman, sinasabi sobra ang safeguards and baka ma-defeat yung purpose. But it is my hope that, the strong safeguards are put in place during the BICAMs, during the deliberations, so that our national interests and the welfare of the Filipino people are protected.
Thank you very much. Well said indeed. Now, I don't want to put you in the spot, but if you if you have an idea already, who will be part of your economic team? Just off the bat. Who are you thinking? Maybe you can come up with several names, but who, if you want to share, of course.
Mike, since I started my term as Vice President, we have constantly been receiving briefings from many of our economic experts. But I think it will be prudent on my part not to name names at this point. But they will have the same characteristics I look for when choosing heads of office. Number one, they must be experts in their field. Number two, they must be respected by the sector they lead. And number three, mahalaga din ito, Mike, they must be good managers. They must be great managers because they will be managing an entire bureaucracy. And number four, they must be empowering and must believe, as I do, that inclusivity is an engine of growth. Kailangan nakakaintindihan kami dito, Mike. And number five, mahalaga din ito, they should all agree to work together.
Well, Madam Vice President, we all know that because of this pandemic, government had to borrow so much money because we are in debt, definitely because of the health costs that was also caused by this pandemic, of course. And with that, clearly, whoever will be president, or if you will be president, you will be faced with a limited fiscal headroom. Will you be giving priority, for example, to infrastructure, build? And if so, will you put more emphasis now on PPP? Because for a time, PPP was set aside and there was more emphasis on ODA and other types of funding. But would you now encourage private sector partnership?
Most definitely, Mike. Infrastructure will most definitely remain a priority. But we must ensure that we are building in a strategic, impactful manner and not just building for the sake of saying we're building. And to this end, we'll focus our infrastructure policy on 3 priority areas. The first one of that is water resources management. The second one is public transport and rural development. And the third one is reconstruction of public infrastructure and housing projects in calamity-stricken areas. Let me just give a brief summary of the 3 priority areas, Mike. The MWSS has already raised concerns that water levels in the Angat Dam might go below minimum by April. Nakakatakot to. In fact, before the pandemic, nagkaroon na tayo ng problema with water supply. And while being prudent in consumption will help, the long-term solution really entails investing in critical infrastructure and ensuring that it is well maintained. So sa akin talaga, Mike, importante sa akin yung focus on water resources management that will provide clean water for all by harnessing available water resources, implement projects for water impounding in major rivers of the country. Meron na nitong study, Mike. There is already a study of how this should be done, anchored on alin na mga rivers sa bansa natin yung pwedeng gamitin. And the second priority area is public transport and rural development. Alam naman natin yung public transport, Mike, matagal na natin itong problema. People are stuck in traffic for hours and private cars still dominate the roads and our mass transport system remains inefficient. And para sa akin, this is really one key stumbling block to growth. People are wasting so much time inside their vehicles or waiting for rides, wasting valuable time that can otherwise be used more productively. So we must build with a mindset of moving people rather than just cars. And that is why public transport must be top of mind in any infrastructure agenda. But having said that, we would also like to prioritize the decongestion of major population centers such as NCR, Cebu, Davao, and all the other major metropolitan areas. We will provide major food production centers with better access to markets. Tapos yung pangatlo, and ito talaga, I am sure everyone will agree that we should invest in digital infrastructure, especially in the countryside. And the third priority area, Mike, yung sabi ko kaninang reconstruction of public infrastructure and housing projects in calamity-stricken areas. Kasi the recent calamities, Typhoon Odette last December and Typhoons Quinta, Rolly, and Ulysses in 2020 have just brought into sharper, more painful focus the cycle we are stuck in. A cycle of devastation and reconstruction that has stunted our economic momentum for so long. Umikot ako ng umikot after Typhoon Odette, and really the devastation is huge, pero maraming mga areas na sila din yung tinatamaan each and every time. So we plan to create resettlement sites for fully damaged houses in dangerous and climate vulnerable areas, and we will provide climate resilient public housing for affected families as permanent resettlements. Ito kasi it has been pag hindi natin pinag-isipan ng maayos, it has been draining our coffers year in and year out. You were asking about PPP. Para sa akin, Mike, we should push for more private-public partnerships because we have seen the amount of good that collaboration with the private sector can produce. pag ginagawa ito ng tama at the Office of the Vice President, we were able to do so many things despite the limited mandate and resources because of collaboration with the private sector. This will help conserve government resources, saka yung borrowing capacity natin for critical public projects like yun nga, water impounding infrastructure, rail projects, seaports. So we will encourage private sector participation in critical PPP projects such as yung roads, expressways, airports, seaports, yung water concession projects. Tapos meron na ngayong mga hybrid models for mass transportation. So that will be, PPP will really play a very big role in my administration.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice President, for that very comprehensive answer. Let's go to another topic, but still, of course, within the economy. The Philippines has been said to be blessed with so much minerals, trillions underneath the ground. But if they remain underneath the ground, they're worth nothing. And yet, somehow, this issue about allowing mining to flourish so it can actually help lift the Philippines out of poverty and perhaps even fund a lot of the funding that is needed post-pandemic, especially since, as we already know, we are deeply in debt precisely because of the need to address the health concerns, the health crisis. In your administration, Madam Vice President, how will you treat the mining industry?
You know, Mike, I am for responsible mining. We must ensure first and foremost, of course, that the environment will be protected and that the benefits we gain from mining activities go back to local communities and contribute to holistic national development. Ito naman, Mike, yung pinag-aawayan for so long. We must always respect the rights of indigenous peoples. I have done a lot of work on this when I was still an alternative lawyer and involved in an NGO called Saligan. So sa akin, Mike, an honest to goodness consultation with local communities is crucial to ensure that any project that will be rolled out should not just be accepted by the community, but should in fact benefit them. And I will also certify as urgent the passage of the NALUA, National Land Use Act. I was one of the authors of NALUA when I was still a member of the 16th Congress. But pending its passage, already issue an executive order, part of which will identify parts of the country which should be declared no mining zones. Ano naman ito, Mike? Most of the advocates are just pushing for reforms in the mining sector, protection of the environment, and making sure that the rights of it should be rights-based always. The rights of indigenous peoples and the local communities should be taken into consideration first and foremost.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. About 51% of, I believe, registered voters now, we have about something like 62 or 63, I think, are women. So what piece or pieces of legislation or initiative have you supported that will help or help empower economically, especially women? And if you become president, what will you continue to push for to make sure that women's rights are properly protected?
You know, Mike, just to give it context, when I was still a member of Saligan, I was the only woman lawyer in our branch, and most of the violence against women cases were assigned to me. So I have been handling many of those domestic abuse cases, etc., etc. And one of the biggest lessons that I learned out of taking care of all those court cases is that women empowerment really is key. Women empowerment is the one weapon that women need for them to thwart the abuses that they have been getting from their abusers. So when I was a member of Congress already, I was very active in pushing for many legislations that will not only equalize the status of women as far as our laws are concerned, but to give a lot of space for giving them economic empowerment. When I became vice president already, women empowerment has been one of the 6 key priority areas of our Angat Buhay program. And what we have been doing is really training women to become entrepreneurs, training women to earn their keep while taking care of their families. We were able to roll out a lot of programs already. We have an ongoing sustainable livelihood and development program. We have workshop for aspiring women entrepreneurs. During the pandemic, we have been helping a lot of women groups. Siguro narinig niyo, Mike, yung local production of PPEs, and in fact,
Yes.
most of the sewing groups that we tap are mainly women sewing groups. But the very idea is really giving them the opportunity to earn while they are taking care of their households and their children. And when we say opportunity, it's really access. It's access to skills training, it's access to capital, it's access to mentoring, it's access to markets.
Madam Vice President, a lot of talk now are ongoing globally and locally about the possibility that we should tax the super rich, because studies have shown from certain groups that during this pandemic, the billionaires became more billionaires, shall we say, became richer. In other words, the inequality gap has really grown so big and exacerbated when this pandemic happened. Will you be amenable to such a, what you call a super rich tax, let's say between 1 to 3%, a progressive annual super rich tax perhaps? Will you be open to that?
You know, Mike, it will always be on the table. Pero sa akin kasi, Mike, our experience in our Angat Buhay program, ano naman talaga, a lot of people who are more privileged than the others, gusto talaga nila to help eh. They just don't know how. So I think it should be the role of government to set up those mechanisms where people who are in the margins are more empowered. They are given more opportunities. They are prioritized as far as government programs are concerned. So para sa akin, taxing more does not resolve the entire, the entire spectrum of inequality. Para sa akin, Mike, it's really systemic. There are a lot of avenues where government should take the lead in making sure that we close the gap. I was in another economic forum yesterday. I was just in the audience, and they were presenting data on the inequality in the Philippines and how the pandemic has exacerbated that. And para sa akin, Mike, a government should take the lead. Government should take the lead in putting up mechanisms so that those in the margins are really given the opportunity to, really given the opportunity to succeed. And when I say given the opportunity to succeed, it's a whole range of many things, including education, including focusing on local industries where we have a competitive advantage, including providing for social protection for them. So para sa akin, Mike, while I'm open to taxing the rich more, I don't think that should only be the solution that would be given.
I guess that's music to a lot of people listening to us right now. Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. We'll take a short break and we'll come back right away. So to all of you out there, don't go away. Don't touch that clicker. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the Meet the Presidentiables economic reforms in the new frontier. And of course, we have with us as our guest, the Vice President herself, VP Lenny Robredo. Thank you again, Madam Vice President, for being with us today, this afternoon, despite your very, very busy schedule, I can just imagine. Now, the pandemic has clearly exposed the vulnerability of the healthcare infrastructure in the country. If elected president, how do you intend to strengthen this?
Hello, Mike. When I put out my kalayaan sa COVID plan, we discussed in detail all the vulnerabilities of our health sector that we should focus on. At ano ba yung mga nakita natin which was exacerbated by the recent pandemic? Yung sa akin, again, I mentioned already earlier that more than 50,000 have died already, millions have lost their jobs already. Around 53% of the population have been vaccinated. Our target was originally 70% of the population by the end of 2021. Hospitals are overcrowded, especially during surges, lalo na yung Delta. We are again in the middle of an intense surge that even absent lockdowns have again emptied workstations as more and more people have gotten sick. Pero best practices around the world already show us an effective containment strategy. Aggressive testing, integrated mobility databases for tracing, strengthening the capacities of our healthcare system for us to be able to provide the treatment required. Pag sinabi nating effective treatment, it means equipping hospitals and frontliners with the tools and support that they need to hold the line. Yung bed capacity should be addressed so that the country reaches a more responsive hospital bed to population ratio. Ang ambition lang muna natin, Mike, ngayon na we think is doable is 1:800. 1 bed to 800 people. Pag tiningnan natin ngayon, nasa 1:1,000 tayo. Pero if you look at the regional data, about 4 of 12 regions, less than 0.5 to every 1,000 ang bed to population capacity. So there is so much to be desired. We have to ensure also that we have the healthcare workers to man the additional beds, and that they are, of course, afforded the dignity of fair benefits and salaries at par with neighboring countries. The reason why we are unable to hold many of them is that because our compensation is not competitive. If we compare it to the compensation being offered by Asian countries, we also have to stockpile medicines and protective equipment to prevent shortages. We do not want what happened in March and April of 2020 to happen again. Vaccines are, of course, paramount. We have to create a permanent vaccine distribution network so that when the next pandemic comes and a vaccine is developed, we would no longer have to do ad hoc vaccination drives. This network can also be utilized outside of pandemic situations, especially for regular vaccines such as flu shots. And eto Mike, ang mahina tayo, yung data gathering, robust data gathering allows definitely a better decision making, and government would be more proactive pag maayos yung data natin, and more effective communications to the public on the true state of infections, the steps necessary to address them. Because doing so lessens social anxiety and cultivates a more solidarity-driven mindset during a crisis. Saka yung targeted and data-informed strategy that could minimize shocks to the economy and allow our economy to remain more open, as opposed to the massive slowdown that happens during a generalized lockdown because we are mostly being reactive. Pero yung long-term nito, Mike, even without the pandemic, we were already able to pass the universal healthcare law. We just need to effectively operationalize it. I am for strengthening community-based public health, making sure that all our barangay health centers, all our rural health centers are equipped with a basic basic equipment that are needed, should have a nurse of its own. Yung ginagawa namin ngayon, Bayanihan e-Consulta, we saw how, how useful it has become, how helpful it has become to people needing medical help. This is something we can institutionalize. So there are a lot of many things, Mike, but we have to focus more on getting through this pandemic first.
Thank you, Madam President, rather Madam Vice President. Energy and supply, energy price supply problems abound. I mean, this has been happening for the past 2 years and seems like there's no real light at the end of the tunnel thus far. And I'm not just talking locally, but globally. China, Europe, India may be heading into this headfirst into a power supply shock. It will really hit China much worse than it hit it financially during the Evergrande crisis, which sent teutonic shock waves to China's financial system. And this could happen as far as the energy situation in China. And if it hits China and the United States, it's definitely going to hit the Philippines. It's not even a question of if it will happen, but when. And if that happens, that will really be very difficult for an emerging market like us, especially reeling from the effects of this ravaging pandemic. So how will you address, if elected president, the energy price and supply problems?
As you have said, Mike, the number one concern now is really energy supply. In the Philippines, the Malampaya gas fields is running dry very soon. There are pending applications for service contracts that have not yet been acted upon. So number one, there should be an immediate review of all these applications and award them as soon as possible. And government should provide support to private companies to fast-track development of oil fields. Medyo nakakatakot ito, Mike, kasi it's around the corner already. And, we have been talking to many different energy advocacy groups, and ang nakuha talaga namin, yung expansion of EVOS, yung Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop, saka yung ARTA, Anti-Red Tape Authority, because both of this can help boost project development, because this can help streamline permit approval processes. Yun daw yung napakatagal. And also, Mike, we have committed to be carbon neutral by 2050. But the first step, of course, is to accelerate this because we don't have a very clear transition plan yet. We need to immediately reorient we already have a Philippine energy plan, but we need to reorient this into a roadmap to increase our levels of energy self-sufficiency with clear milestones. Ano ba yung strategies? Ano ba yung trackers for exploration? How do we plan to retire our coal plants if we need that? Yung nakikita natin ngayon, yung LNG, liquefied natural gas, is the only practicable option as of now. And to ensure supply, as we transition to perform our commitments for a more carbon neutral Philippines in 2050, kailangan yung transition roadmap. And to ensure the supply of LNG, DOE should take the lead instead of just allowing parties to import individually. There is a need to build LNG terminals, and sabi ko nga, because of our COP26 commitments, we already need to aggressively develop indigenous and renewable sources of energy. And I mentioned earlier already, we don't yet have a roadmap for retirement of coal plants. Yung prioritization of low-cost indigenous energy sources such as solar, wind, geothermal will aggressively promote utilization of non-coal indigenous fuel sources for immediate deployment to avert a power shortage. Yung problema naman ito, yung presyo. So we need to also focus on that, develop more geothermal energy resources. A few years ago, pangalawa tayo in the world as a geothermal energy source. But review having an exploration risk fund kasi napakamahal ng early exploration phase nito. One sustainable alternative also which are being pushed by some sectors is to encourage high consumption volume consumers to put up their own solar panels for those who can afford. Putting up panels in eco zones, for example, can shave off the peak to manage the supply. Promote mini grids and off-grid technologies for remote communities. We have also been discussing
I think we got disconnected.
Yeah, we lost Vicky Lenny. Her frame.
We lost the sound. So just a little
okay.
technical difficulty.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I lost my signal for a while. But can I continue with the discussion?
Yes,
I just
please.
Energy price. I got lost
Yes.
somewhere, but I'll just discuss energy price because it's something that I have not discussed earlier yet. Again, we have been talking to many different sectors on this. One suggestion is to update the interpretation of the VAT implementing laws, implementing rules and regulations to exclude components of the power bill that do not have value added. Will help lower the cost of electricity. And legislation is also needed for the executive branch to calibrate. This has been very, very controversial also, to calibrate excise tax rates to respond to changes in global prices to compensate for increase and decrease on VAT collection. There have been groups who have also been pushing on a review of the systems loss allowance to check if it would affect the decrease in cost of electricity. So there are many suggestions coming from many different groups. And we continue to discuss these discussions with many of these groups.
Before we take a short break, I might as well, since we're on this topic of energy, which is very important and crucial, are you open to nuclear power?
It's definitely on the table. It's definitely on the table, Mike. So while I am open to discussions, it is very, very clear that the priority now is should be moving away from fossil fuel dependence towards a shift to renewable energy. We should definitely on that energy. We should also ensure that energy costs do not hamper our economic trajectory. And, this is a very contentious issue, but as I've said, it's on the table. We are open to discussions, but it is very clear to us. It is very clear to us that we are focusing our goals on really moving away from fossil fuel dependence. And, when you talk of nuclear power, we always talk of what are the proper safeguards and technology for safety to minimize environmental impact. These are very crucial as well.
Well, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we will have more of Vice President Lenny Robredo. So don't go away. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Meet the Presidentiables, and we are honored with the presence of VP Lenny Robredo. Maraming salamat ulit, Madam Vice President. Since we touched on energy as well, and you also touched on energy supply in Malampaya, perhaps this is a question that I think must be asked as well. We all know that in the Reed Bank, it has been said that there are a huge gas and oil deposits in there. Unfortunately, the government and the private sector are really unable to really make a determination of how much because of our problem with China. Are you amenable to enter into a joint venture agreement compliant with the Constitution to allow both countries, after agreeing to certain parameters, legal parameters, and specific issues as to taxation, jurisdiction, etc., to allow both countries to actually go there, find out how much is really there, because if there's nothing there, what's there to quibble about? Would you be open to a joint venture arrangement with China?
Una sa lahat, Mike, para sa akin talagang ang atin ay atin. Our foreign policy will always put the interests of our country and our people first. We will have to address challenges always with courage and honor, and we should be unrestrained by fear and be free from the influence of any political power. Having said that, we will make sure that our relationship with China or any other country for that matter will always be based on mutual trust and respect and a recognition of the international laws. So any agreement with China, especially insofar as the West Philippine Sea is concerned, must first be premised on China's recognition of the arbitral ruling. Yun sa akin, Mike, dapat yun yung step one. Now, if we are to enter into any joint venture or joint exploration activity with China, dapat ang unang requirement natin that China recognizes our arbitral win dahil ito yung premised on that. And para sa akin, a good neighbor and a real friend is really fair and follows international law. Para sa akin, dapat naiintindihan that might does not make right. It does not bully or take advantage. And any leader should have the courage to stand up for the dignity of our nation. Ang pinuno ng bansa, dapat handa tayong ipaglaban yung ating karapatan. Hindi dapat tayo nakikipagkompromiso sa ating kasarinlan at teritoryo. So sa akin, Mike, I will be open to that only if yung step one, recognition of the arbitral ruling first.
There's a lot of talk going on about our participation in the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP or RCEP. It has been signed, but it still needs ratification in the Senate. And we all know that the main purpose of this particular treaty or arrangement is to harmonize a number of existing bilateral trade agreements. And it involves around practically 30% of the global economy. And for us, a lot of people say that for us not to be part of it or to delay participation will have its negative impacts as far as the Philippines is concerned. So what is your position, Madam Vice President, on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership?
Ako sa akin kasi, Mike, ang belief ko, dapat yung Pilipinas has to actively participate in many regional and bilateral, multilateral talks, especially with our ASEAN neighbors. Kasi we have to assert our we have to assert we have to reassert the integrity of our country. Kaya para sa akin, we have to be very open and in fact take a very active role in many of the regional and multilateral talks with many countries. Sa akin, without exception. Halimbawa, even if our relationship with China is complicated, I am all for nourishing our relations as far as trade or, trade is concerned kasi wala naman tayong disagreements doon. And so with many other countries. Para nga sa akin, even our arbitral ruling, we can use that to leverage forming a coalition of nations so that we would have a better standing as far as pushing for our rights are concerned. So para sa akin, Mike, we have to take a very active role. We have to take a very active role in everything that is happening around us. That is one way by which we can reclaim our dignity as a country and our integrity as a nation.
Maraming salamat, Madam Vice President. Marami nagdagsakan ang mga tanong galing sa ating mga tagapakinig at nanonood, Madam Vice President, na pati ako nahihilo na rin sa kakabasa at hindi ko na rin mabasa lahat sa Viber, sa chat box, etc. Kaya napansin nyo, minsan yung mata ko kung saan na po napupunta. Pero nakikinig po ako sa lahat na sinasabi nyo at nare-record po natin yan. At, pero allow me now, Madam Vice President, to read a question from one of our keen listeners and audience. Sabi sa tanong na ito, the isang sambayanan has, as part of the coalition, organizations which are left-leaning. How much of their agenda do you subscribe to?
You're referring to One Sambayan, Mike?
Yes, One Sambayan. Ito po ang tanong sa isang tanong na galing sa ating mga tagapakinig na nanonood. Kasi I think sinasabi nila maraming may mga left-leaning groups dun sa coalition na yun, na grupo. And siguro gusto lang nila malaman how influential or do you subscribe to what they stand for on certain policies, like for example, their protectionist policies, for example.
Pag tinignan natin, Mike, yung membership ng isang bayan, not just left-leaning organizations, but also those perceived to be ultra-right. Parang yung membership naman ng isang bayan reflects a very broad spectrum of the many forces in our country. Yung pagtingin ko doon, kahit iba-iba yung pinanggalingan, sabi ko nga from the ultra-left to the ultra-right, I think what they are all united in the desire to institute much needed reforms along the principles that we also align with. Halimbawa, the need for honest, competent, credible governance that can unlock our people's potential. So in the few assemblies that I attended with isang bayan, ito naman yung pinag-uusapan eh. We have a healthy respect for the differing points of view that many of the members share, but we are working on, many of the members are united in this desire to institute the much needed reforms as far as governance is concerned. Sa akin naman, that will always remain my guiding light. As for the particular issues, basta ang commitment ko to your sector is really to create an environment where enterprises have a chance to compete fairly. Yun naman, dun ako susumpa. We will not fixate ourselves on over-regulation. Yung sinasabi ko kanina in my speech na sometimes government over-fixates itself on restrictions, parang policing lang yung tinitingnan. Para sa akin, ang role ng government is to encourage, make sure that all the processes are fair and transparent. Kasi our belief is that inclusivity should always be the driving force for real growth. Pero ang commitment ko din that your voice will always be heard as we work for the common good. Ito namang mga groups na who are all together now in one umbrella, pinag-uusapan doon what unites them. And yun nga, what unites them is really the desire to to push for the much needed reforms, especially along the principles of governance.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Isa sa mga issues din na lumabas ngayon ay yung Supreme Court decision, yung Mandanas ruling, na nanalo the petitioners won, and the Supreme Court has held that the taxes, both from the BIR as well from the Bureau of Customs, should be devolved to the local governments. And it's also, of course, it's enshrined in the local government code. But there are some sectors that are saying that this is not exactly a good move, because the local governments do not have the expertise on how to use these funds. The usage of funds is put into question, their ability to absorb the funds, and of course the expertise themselves of certain local governments. If elected president, how will you ensure that the Mandanas ruling, which in principle is a good ruling in compliance with the Constitution, will be effectively executed, implemented to the benefit, of course, of the local government and eventually the people?
Mike, we have to admit that not all LGUs have the same capabilities. So really, it is very important to match the level and the nature of support to their specific needs. Sa akin lang, for example, regardless of the specific state of each LGU, I think we can all agree that strengthening the basic services sa community level ng per LGU is paramount. Halimbawa na lang, Mike, example, yung health. Yung ating health-related responsibilities in the time of the pandemic. Diba, yung COVID responsive infrastructure and logistics need to be improved to contain the virus and ensure the safety of workers and patients. So sa akin, Mike, kailangan talaga ng may put up a mechanism where yung guidance is, the hand-holding should be every step of the way. Kasi sabi ko nga, not all LGUs are on the same footing. Those who need more help should be given more guidance. Makakatulong siguro, Mike, if DILG, for example, provides for a menu of yung menu of programs that the LGUs can choose where to put the money from the Mandanas ruling on. Marami, even with the LGUs, I have talked to a number of them already. Talaga yung confusion na doon. Yung confusion kung ano yung pwede, ano yung hindi. So ako ang suggestion ko nito, Mike, a lot of capacity building we have to invest in a lot of capacity building. Also incentivizing LGUs to use the additional funds in programs na mas lasting yung effect. Yung nakakatakot lang kasi nito, Mike, kasi baka yung absorptive capacity also. May problema sa absorptive capacity also of LGUs, and yung natatakutan natin kung paano ito baka masayang. Baka masayang kung mahina ang absorptive capacity. So ako, Mike, especially for the first year of implementation, which is 2022, kailangan talaga sobrang tutok. Sobrang tutok as far as the parameters are concerned. Ano lang ba yung pwede? Ano ba yung hindi pwede? Yun yung capacity building. Ang suggestion ko na yung mga different line agencies should be given their specific responsibilities on monitoring and again capacitating LGUs if the programs were under their administration from before the Mandanas ruling took effect. So maraming gagawin. There have been a lot of capacitation programs already, but still the confusion is still there. Every time I get to talk to local government officials, parating sinasabi, hindi namin alam kung pwede ito. Or excited kaming gamitin for this. Pero para sa akin, national government should incentivize para the additional funds can go a long way.
Maraming salamat ulit, Madam Vice President. At again, titignan ko po ulit ang mga katanungan galing sa ating mga nakikinig. Marami po talaga. Siguro yung iba dito, ipapasa na lang namin sa inyong staff. You may want to answer it also eventually. I'm sure the Secretariat will take care of that. Ito naman ang katanungan. It's personal, but at the same time, it is also actually an official question because ang tanong dito ay, who will be your official escort as president? Kasi nga nung panahon ni President Cory, nandun naman po si President Noynoy. Kung kayo po ay mahalal bilang Pangulo ng Republika ng Pilipinas, sino naman po ang iyong matatawag nating official escort or perhaps, if I may say, your first gentleman?
Ako, definitely, there will be no first gentleman. Yan yung sigurado. Pero the question of who will be my official escort, I honestly have not considered it yet. I honestly do not think I need one. Pero if I would, syempre the default would be any of my 3 daughters. Although, of course, this would have to be a family decision. All my daughters are all adults now, and they have their own careers and plans. And syempre, their thoughts and sentiments regarding such a duty would carry the most weight. Ano naman, Mike? None of my children are involved in my work. Pera na lang in crisis situations. Like during the pandemic, my second daughter, in fact, all of them, tumulong na sa amin. Yung panganay ko, tumulong siya to set up Bayanihan e-Consulta. Yung second ko has been volunteering in many of our COVID response initiatives because she's a doctor. Yung pangatlo ko naman who's studying in the US because she's home now. Dahil no face-to-face classes now. Yes, she has been helping me. She's a volunteer also. She's a volunteer call bridging agent in our Bayanihan e-Consulta kasi kulang kami na ngayon volunteers, and there has been a deluge of patients. Pero that only happens in extraordinary situations. Pero in ordinary situations, I would rather that they do their thing para hindi nakatutok sa sa trabaho ko sa politika din yung mga buhay nila. So, kung kinakailangan ng escort, it would definitely be one of them.
that was a very direct and honest answer, and we appreciate it. So, tandaan niyo po, wala pong magiging first gentleman. Kaya yung mga interesado
sigurado na yun, Mark.
Mga interesado mangligaw dyan, sorry na lang kayo.
Wala.
But, Madam Vice President, ayan nga, daming tanong. So if you, with your kind permission, kasi we're running out of time, konting oras na lang po tayo, kaya tanungin ko na rin mga iba pang tanong dito. Isa naman ang tanong paano mo daw papalakasin ang ating mga government financial institutions? Pinakamahalaga kasi talaga, Mike,
siguraduhin natin na good governance is the norm. Pag sinabi natin good governance is the norm, it sets in motion so many other things. So I will not be promising, but I will go back to what we did at the office of the Vice President. When I became Vice President, the first thing that we did is to apply for ISO certification. Why was it important? We wanted to convey the message that we are serious in the work that we're doing, that we are making sure that all our processes comply with international standards. After we were able to get our ISO certification, we made sure that year in and year out, nagre-recertify kami. After that, we exerted all effort in making sure that we get the highest COA audit rating. So for 3 consecutive years now, we have been getting an unqualified opinion from COA, which is the highest. And not only that, we make sure that all our programs are really strategic, are efficient. 2 of our COVID response programs were awarded as 2 of the 6 best COVID response programs in the entire bureaucracy. We have also been just awarded excellence in human resource management by the Civil Service Commission. So kaya ko to, Mike, sinasabi kasi I would like to believe that really creating mechanisms to make sure that good governance is the norm is very important. I am very big on transparency. I am very big on accountability. Even the way we handle the day-to-day operations of the office, we make sure that we are very professional as far as that is concerned. With the financial institutions in government, what is crucial is choosing the right people to head the agencies. Sinabi ko na naman kanina kung ano yung mga hinahanap natin, not just experts, but people who are respected, who are good managers, who are not corrupt. Kasi a lot of decisions will be hinged on the character also of the people that we will be appointing to these positions. They should share my the way I look at things on how governance should work. They should also be big on transparency and accountability. Kanina sinabi ko na din that they should share my belief that inclusiveness is the engine for growth. So many other things, but it's basically institutionalizing governance in all levels of government.
You know, they say, Madam Vice President, time flies when you're really having fun. And sadly, for all of us, we ran out of time, but there's a deluge of questions coming. And I'm sure you will take time out to take a look at them and perhaps answer them. So it has been a very, very productive, insightful, engaging afternoon. One of my most engaging afternoons, in fact. And on behalf of Phoenix and the other business organizations, as well as Signal TV and the other media partners like the Manila Times, we would like to thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us today. Maraming salamat po. And kita-kita po tayo sa mga susunod na araw. Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. And at this point,
Thank you, Mike.
My pleasure, ma'am. And at this point, bibigay ko na po kayo sa isa sa magagaling na lady leaders din. Walang iba, kundi si Risa Mantaring.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much, VP Lenny Robredo, for sharing your plans and programs with us and for very graciously answering all those questions on such a wide range of topics. As somebody in the audience said, straight talk, just all straight talk. And to Attorney Mike for ably moderating the discussion, as always. Truly, this session is very relevant to all of us, the voters, to help us with our decision this coming May 2022. To close today's session, may I now call on Mr. Henry Lim Bonlyong, President of the Federation of Filipino-Chinese Chambers of Commerce Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Incorporated.
Thank you, Risa. Thank you. Of course, to our Honorable Vice President, Lenny Robredo, whose husband is the close friends of the Federation and also a very, very close friends of the Lim Family Association. To my Phoenix President, Michael Guarin, Manila Times Chairman and CEO Dante Ang II, Attorney Mike Toledo, my very good friend. Of course, Ms. Risa Mantaring, Makati Business Club trustees, leaders of the business community, our sponsors and friends and media, esteemed guests and viewers, ladies and gentlemen. Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Federation of the Filipino-Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industries and our co-presenters, Phoenix, Signal, the Manila Times, thank you to our guest presidential candidate, Vice President Lenny Robredo, for gracing our Meet the Presidentiables Forum today on discussing economic policies. Salamat, Vice President Lenny Robredo, para sa inyong komprehensibong talumpati sa inyong pagbabahagi ng mga ideya at sa inyong plataforma at mga patakaran para sa ekonomiya ng Pilipinas. Our Federation has worked with VP Lenny Robredo in her anti-poverty initiative, Angat Buhay, through our Federation's philanthropic program called the Operations Barrio School Programs. We are donating 20 units of 2 classroom school buildings for public schools in the economically disadvantaged provinces, and some of these have been turned over already. Kami sa Federation na naniniwala ang edukasyon ay isa sa mga mahusay na paraan upang malutas ang malawakang kahirapan at mga panlipunang kawalang katarungan ng Pilipinas. This forum series is an opportunity for us to learn about our candidates' economic program and the platform so that the Philippines can achieve prosperity for all, overcome the pandemic and the recent calamity. We appreciate this opportunity to hear Vice President Robredo's message to the business community. We need the continued support of our government leaders, continued socio-economic reforms, and stability to help business overcome the global pandemic. In calamities like Super Typhoon Odette, we need to work together to step and create jobs to boost Philippine economic recovery. The Federation has just donated more than 20,000 packages, 50,000 packages of, to the victims of Typhoon Odette the last 2 weeks. And of course, the Federation has over 170 Filipino, Chinese chambers and various trade and industries organizations nationwide under umbrella from Apari to Tawi-Tawi. And I felt the pulse of our grassroots entrepreneurs. We are hopeful for a better future starting next week, Chinese Lunar New Year on February 1, which is the energetic year of the tiger. Allow me to reiterate our forecast for Philippine economic growth this year, 2022, from 6.5% to 7.5%, especially if we continue to be resilient, uphold health protocols and vaccines, learn to live with the global pandemic, continue reforms, support business, especially our SMEs, attract some more foreign investment, direct investment, and boost our trade ties with all the world's big powers, which unite us as a nation in social harmony and make the country more globally competitive. Makaisa tayong lahat sa tulungan natin ang Pilipinas na makabangon sa pandemya at iba pang mga problema. First more, thank you, Madam Vice President Lenny Robredo, for joining us today and sharing your ideas. Best wishes and good health, Madam Vice President. Finally, we'd like to thank media guests, also our sponsors, partner organizations, participants, and viewers. Maraming salamat. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you all and see you in our next sessions.